we've been understood. Because you can't really do problem solving until people have sort of got that thing out of the way. Unfortunately, as much as we try to be rational humans, and our professional work kind of depends on that, we're also still irrational and somewhat emotional, um, just by nature of being human, and that's not a bad thing. But it's a thing that we need to consider, and so when it comes to listening, that needs to be taken into account. So if somebody is feeling that they've been purposely not understood, Muhammad Mane. So I got a few Muhammads here. I'm just trying to think which one are we talking about here? Is that Mane al-Shabain? Maybe, I don't know. I'm thinking that's who be it. Who might be. Oh, there's Loa, right there. Awesome. Okay, so yeah, so I've only got a few students here, but right. So the communication requires that we understand other people, and that we express to them that understanding. And sometimes that just means making an effort to try and understand. It certainly doesn't mean sort of skipping ahead into something that we think we understand. To really understand, that requires us to listen very, very carefully. And so I hope we've sort of got that idea. That was the idea of communication, and that's why we spoke so much at length about active listening. Asking questions, encouraging responses, listening carefully. That is all part of what we need to do in a service desk in order to understand people. And so they need to be understood so that we can progress to solving their
वल्ला मुझे नहीं है, मेरा पढ़ने का भी इतना दिल नहीं कर रहा, कसम से पता नहीं क्या बकवास है। जाके बात
problems.
करते हैं यार
So
उनसे।
that's what we're trying to do on the service desk. The other thing that we did, and what I should do here is I should in the Zoom meeting I should share the screen. So the other thing that's related to that, very important, we spoke about last time, is what about telephone communication on the service desk? And rather than go through all the stuff that we've already spoken about, you'll remember some of these slides, I hope. But the idea being that the telephone is a very powerful sort of tool in the office. The other technology in the office also are sort of related to the telephone. And we would include, I suppose, there the mobile telephone, because mobile telephone is kind of used by everybody now. We did talk briefly about voice over IP systems. That's about as far as we got. And so, well, yes, I remember we actually talked about the ACD, voicemail and the ACD. So we got a bit further than this. I mentioned to you fax that hardly anybody uses those. It's used in America still. I mean, we have one here at the college. People sometimes don't trust digital communications because of hacking. And so they thought that faxes are less hackable. But now the transmission is going over a digital line anyways. So yeah, it's probably less hackable. So the ACD, we needed to talk about that. I think I started out on this last lesson. And so I hope you got the idea of that. This is the thing where you call and it says press 1 for English, press 2 for Arabic. And then it goes on to say, press 1 for mobile phones, press 2 for fiber in the home, press 3 for our television stations, that type of thing. So your ACD is going to get you through to the right person. So it's an automatic call distributor. The right person being the person in the service desk who's an expert on the issue that your incident relates to. And so your ACD has a lot of sort of special equipment involved. Yeah, so this diagram here shows that a little bit better. You can see there's some servers There's a lot of communications between the servers and the individuals for your agents and your customers. Lots of different channels, we call them, so customers can call in using their mobile phones, using their ordinary phones, or even through their internet connection on their computer. All of that goes through switches and then to servers. It's a fairly large sort of system for many companies, your ACD, though it could be run probably with a little bit of software on a small computer for some companies. Okay, so the voice, we also talked about this, your voice response unit, where details that come out of a database can be spoken to you. Now, there must be something like that on my mobile phone, because just before this meeting happened, my telephone said to me, your meeting is starting now, kind of thing, right? So all of that kind of technology is sort of available on our computer systems, so that somebody calling into your into your service center is able to be connected to a computer which more or less talks to them and tells them things that are on the database, um, and without a person being involved. And so that's our technology, that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work the way that we want it to work. There's another thing there. So our um, our VRUs, voice recognition units, so that we can talk to the computer and the computer responds back to us. And again, all of that technology has been more or less perfected on our mobile phones, but it will work in larger computer systems as well, so that we can implement that on our service desk. Okay, so the screen pop idea is that you can talk to a system using your voice, and then a query can be made out of what you've spoken, and then data can be pulled out of a database and perhaps put on a screen or spoken to you. Now, this happens because you'll be watching a video sometimes, and without it having gone to any expensive sort of laboratory, what'll happen is just your software that you've got built into YouTube or whatever will be taking the words that are being said and putting them into subtext at the bottom of your video. And so that sort of just seems to happen automatically. That's the level of technology that we're at now. The thing that you need to keep in mind here is that all of this technology is if it's not driven by money, it is constrained by money. So often the idea is we introduce the technology to increase our profits or to reduce our costs. If that's not the case, then at the very least, the technology will be constrained by its costs. And it'll have to show some improvement in the bottom line to stay as a project within the business. All right, so this is where we left off, I think, about what's the best way for us to deal with our customers. Now, I've got my earphones on. I got the wrong ones.
I don't know. I was wearing the wrong earphones. Could you hear me before? Oh, I am so sorry.
Yeah, loud and clear.
You could hear me before, but now you could hear. Could you hear me before as well?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good, because I couldn't hear you, and I was wondering why. I was wearing the wrong earphones. All right, so now I've got the right ones on, and now I can hear people. That's awesome. So this is this bunch of slides now until the end of this deck of slides is all about how do we, working in the service desk, use the telephone where we're answering the phone. How do we do that in the best way? And so there's a number of points related to that. And so as this point here says, that we could use a script. If you're working with a business where you have a high volume of calls which are of the same type, then it might be that business implements a script. This will be obvious to you, I think, when you talk to people who are on a service desk, for example, at a bank or a telephone company or something like that, that at a certain part of the conversation, you can tell that what they're saying is something that they've either memorized or they're reading, and it's like, is there anything else that we can, or here we have this offer, sir, blah, blah, and blah, blah, and blah, blah. Okay, so they'd be reading from a script, and that's kind of a good thing to do in some circumstances, to use that script, because it makes sure that you don't miss out on things that needed to be said to the customer. And particularly at certain points in a call. So to make sure that you've gathered all the data from the customer. If you're on a service desk, which is servicing people for IT, there might be some things some data that you might not need to gather. So you might actually be sitting with this sheet in front of you and writing in some things, right? Okay, so what is the IP address, or maybe they could read that off the screen. Where are you located? What stuff have you got open on your screen? All of this type of stuff. You could have a script that either you memorized or you're reading. Um, so when you answer a telephone call, there's a general professional way of doing that, and that's mentioned here in these 4 points. So basically, you see the 4 points here with this example. And we've got 3 or 4 examples of them coming up now. So basically, it's always going to be like this. You uh, you answer the phone politely and in a friendly way. You identify yourself. So, hi, this is Mohammed. So you identify yourself. You identify that you're working in the service desk, and you ask them, and you start the conversation. How can you help them, right? And so here's 3 or 4 different ways of doing that. And may I have your name first? So, which is kind of the same as how can I help you? May I have your customer ID, which is kind of the same, but that's going to allow you to get started in the call using your system. And so when you're answering your calls, the things that we learned in the previous lesson, they're very important here. So we are going to use active listening. Now this thing here, it looks like just a very small idea, that how important is that? But asking for the same information in the same order every time is actually going to make your answering the phone a lot more efficient. And it's especially important if you have the same customer is calling up multiple times over a period of months or whatever. Maybe you got a small service desk in a company like here at the College of North Atlantic, and people are having, and maybe it's not even about an incident. Maybe it's about a service request that they make on a regular basis. If you ask them the same things in the same order, they'll know what to expect, and that interaction will be a lot more uh, effective and efficient. So we don't skip steps just because this person rang us up last week and with the same service request. We will still go through the same questions in the same order, so that there's that standardization, and so that they know what to expect. Sometimes your customer, so supposing you're on a service desk and you're an IT service desk, I don't know if I want to go through all of this like this, because you do have all of this recorded in the slides that I've given to you, right? So I'm going to make this a little bit shorter, but people will ask you to help them with products and services that are not part of what you do. In which case, you've got a number of ways you can do it. You can do a best efforts, which is just, I'll help you as best I can. You can give them a contact of somebody who can help them outside the company. But what we don't do is we just don't just say, oh no, I can't help you with that. We'll give them a few minutes to do the best we can, if we can, or else we'll give them a name generally. Um, and that's actually a better way of doing it than trying to solve things that we don't have the tools to do it. So I'm not going to go through all of this in detail, because I want you to go back and look at the slide that I've deposited that there in the content, and it's got the PowerPoint slides with a discussion on each slide. So, but that's the idea of unsupported products, is that we will try and give them a best effort, or we will send them to somebody who can do it. When we take a message, the thing there is obviously we need to get that message through to the person who should receive it. Now, we have a tool in the service desk that helps us to record phone incidents, and well, for in our example, like OTRS or whatever, that is a incident management system. And so we would normally, not like in the old days, we would record it on a piece of paper, but we would normally record and open a ticket and record the details of that ticket. And so rather than on paper, we have a computer system where we do all that now. So what if somebody calls up and the person that they want to talk to is not there? I want to speak to so and so. Then there's a certain way of answering that. And here's an example of that. So we can say that the person is away. We don't say, oh, he's off having a coffee break, because that's kind of unprofessional, yeah, to say that about our colleagues. We just would say they're not available. Can I help you? And if you can't, then you take a message. Now, closing the call, that's also kind of important that you do it in a certain way. Basically, the main thing of all the other things there is you need to summarize what's happened in the call. Make sure that you understand everything that you're going to do, everything that they're going to do, that you both understand that and you've summarized that. And then you have to let that person who's called you up, let them hang up first, right? And so there's a few things that we do at the end of the call to make sure that that happens. We ask them, is there anything else? And you wait for them, and then okay, thank you, please call again, have a nice day, and then wait. We don't want to have the situation where the customer is hanging up the phone, and just as they're hanging up the phone they go, oh, I want to ask him this, and then they pull the phone back up to their ear and they hear click. We don't want that. So what we do is we wait for the click before we hang up. We let them hang up first. And so this is what we do here. I mean, all of those things here, we'll see once we've summarized everything that's happened, once we've asked them if there's anything else we can do, we thank them. And all of this, you can see, we're just making sure that we don't hang up first, so that we make sure that they've actually been satisfied in that call. Here's some things that we can use to on our tickets. So when a person comes in and makes a phone call, we're going to put that into a ticket. We will set a time when we think that should be completed by. This idea of impact and urgency is a way of prioritizing. Is it a high priority, a medium priority, or a low priority ticket? And so what makes it a high priority ticket is how big is the impact and how big is the urgency. Where the impact is how many people or how much systems are affected by this, and the urgency is how does time affect it. Do we have to fix this today or tomorrow or in the next 10 minutes before we start having big problems. And okay, so here's just an example of those. Now, the next little bit there is about putting somebody on hold. And in the notes here, it actually talks about 3 different types of putting people on hold, and it uses temperature as a way of sort of differentiating them. So when we're talking about that temperature, we're not talking about temperature of the room. We're talking about the temperature of the call. So we have cold, warm, and hot. And so, but with all of those calls, if we're going to put transfers, but with all of those calls and all of those transfers, if we're going to transfer somebody and put them on hold or whatever, we always ask their permission to do that, right? We always say, okay, there's somebody else who can solve this incident for you better. I want to get them. I'll have to put you on hold for a minute and then transfer you through. Is that okay? Or would you prefer that I get them to call you back later? That type of thing. We always give them a chance. We tell them how long it's going to be that they're going to be on hold, and get them to say yes, it's okay before we actually go and put them on hold. So here's an example of that, Mr. Timmer. I'm going to put you on hold. It's going to take about a minute, and then I'll get back to you with some details. Now, when you do that, make sure that you don't, if you're putting somebody on hold, don't tell them that they're going to put them on hold for a minute and then be away for 3 minutes. If you think you're going to be away for 3 minutes, tell them you're going to be 5 minutes and ask them if it's okay. Then when you come back after 3 minutes, they're happy, because you came back so quickly. Not, you told them 1 minute and you come back 5 minutes later, they're not happy, what I mean? And that's going to affect the rest of the call. So here's what I was referring to a minute ago is about the temperature. We have this concept of a hot transfer, warm transfer, and cold transfer. It just has to do with if you're transferring a call, you put them on hold or put them transfer through to somebody else. We can refer to it by its temperature. The hot just means that throughout the call, even though you're getting other people involved in the call, you stay on the call with them. That's a hot transfer, sometimes called a conference call. Warm transfer is where you put them through to another person, and before hanging up, you make sure that you've asked them both if there's any other information that you need from them. You tell them all the information that you know about the incident. Tell both the customer and the other person, and then you hang up only after that. With a cold transfer, there's no information that you're passing on. I mean, a cold transfer is probably the person rang up and asked specifically to speak to so and so, and you just put them through. Okay, so yeah. When are they appropriate? Okay, the speaker phone is for that HOTS transfer when you're staying on the line. Multiple people are in the call at the same time. If you're going to do that, you have to tell the person on the other end that you have multiple people here. I have multiple people here. Look, so and so is in the room, and you get them to introduce themselves so that because what's happening is if you have a conversation with somebody and they're on the other end of the phone and you're talking with them and all of a sudden they hear a strange voice, it's going to put them off. They're going to kind of think that you're breaking their privacy, that you got somebody listening in on them, that type of thing. It really does put people off. I mean, just try it sometime. It's not good. So if we're going to have a couple of people in a room around a speakerphone, we make sure that everybody is introduced, so we don't have that situation where somebody thinks that somebody's eavesdropping on them. Everybody that's in the call should be introduced. So that's the main thing about that. And so there's another situation where permission is going to be required. I got other people in there. Is that okay with you? Or would you prefer that we, talk later at a different, more private setting? And then there's the warm transfer. The idea here is that you do hand over and transfer the call, but only after you've given all the information that you have to both parties. Again, permission would be required because you're going to hang up, and so you want their permission that you're going to hand them over. And the cold call, as it says, the cold transfer, that's going to be when you're just handing it off to somebody else. That other person and this person probably spoken before, and so they're kind of going to be good with that. Not going to spend too much time on that. Okay, just about the end of this set of notes, this deck of cards, if you want to say. The idea being in the next couple of slides is that telephone service desk work is kind of a skill. I mean, so there's a skill set with a bunch of things that you can learn in order to do it better. And so you could go on a training course. There are training materials that you can do online or whatever that will help you to work on a telephone in a service desk area in a more effective way. And that could be, as it says here, something that you do over the internet, or it could be where you go and sit down in a class with a bunch of people. Now, the next slide or two is about, well, how do we check to make sure the quality of our telephone communication with our customers? How do we keep that quality good? Well, one of the things that we do is we can monitor the calls. The calls can be recorded. And then, for example, a manager could check the call. And so you'll notice that sometimes when you've spoken to people on a service desk, that while you're waiting for the automatic call distributor to put you through to the person you get to talk to, you'll hear that there's an announcement there, which is, this call will be monitored for training and quality purposes, something like that. Well, what that means is that the call is going to be recorded. And, probably the person who's talking to you, the service desk person, is going to listen to the call later, or can listen to the call later. And maybe their manager might listen to the call later too. And if their manager is going to listen to the call later, what they'll be listening to it for is to give training to the service rep on how well did they do that call and some things. And that could be part of their evaluation to whether they get a new contract or whether they get a pay rise or whatever. It could be that at the end of every month or year or whatever, they have to have their manager check through their calls. No, so that's one thing. You're going to monitor the calls by just recording them and having people listen to them. Another thing that they'll do is they'll monitor the calls by how long are the calls. What's the average length of time? And generally, this might sound weird, but generally the ideal is to have the calls not be too long. So we want our customer service reps to get as many calls in a day as possible. Yeah, just from the efficiency, dollars and cents point of view. And so they'll measure the average time of a call. They'll measure how many calls that you take on a particular incident. All right. So how often are you closing the calls, and how much time does it take for you to close the calls? All of those things can be measured, and then those measurements can be assigned to the particular representative, and then can be part of their review. Yeah, so the timing, that can all be built into the software. Aside from that, a more direct way of measuring how good the call would be to just go and ask the customer what they thought of the call. And so often, if you have a phone call on a service desk, what'll happen is soon after the phone call, you'll receive an email or something like that. And would you please complete this survey about what did you think about that telephone call that you had with our service rep? And so you'll fill it out, and you'll say, yeah, this was good. That service rep solved my problems, and blah blah blah, or not. And so that's a thing. You can have a survey, or sometimes somebody will call you up and talk to you and say, okay, you just had this thing. Did they solve your problem? What did you think of that? So that would be a customer satisfaction survey. It could be done by them phoning you, or more likely it's going to be they're just going to send you an email, and and then there'll be a link in the email, and you go to that link, and then you have a little form that you fill out. So that's quite common. I don't know about you guys, but I've had that happen several times, especially if it's been a long call with a large company. They'll send me out a survey and say, did we do this? Did we do that? How good was that? Rito does that. What happens with Rito? Well, I call them, and then afterwards I get an SMS, which is, would you fill out a thing? And it's like 4 or 5 questions about the call that I just had. So the point that I'm making is that has become sort of standard practice, is that once we've had a call, is we're going to check with the customer. How are we going to check? We're just going to ask them, what did you think? Is that a good call or not? And they can say yes or no. They have that ability, right? And yeah, so the idea here is about, you should bring to your work a positive attitude. Really, when you're dealing with people, that's the attitude is going to come. People are going to notice your attitude, and so if you truly do enjoy sort of working with people, they'll figure that out. And if you don't, they'll figure that out too. So if you want to work with them, it'd probably be a good idea if you worked on your attitude. You can change your attitude. I mean, your attitude, it can change. You can get up, yesterday I didn't like working, but tomorrow I do. Maybe that's because I sat and I thought about it. I realized, it wasn't so bad after all, right? And maybe these people, these other human beings, are not so bad either. So that's something that you can work on as a person in the service desk, is how do you feel about the people that you're working with, your customers. I think that's sort of it. That's what I wanted you to sort of cover. We've looked at that. You guys did work on an assignment sort of thing for me, and I've marked most of those. Any questions? Okay, let me see.
Mr. When you will mark the assignment,
Which assignment?
the worksheet one.
I think I've already marked it. I marked all the ones from this morning. Did I not mark yours?
I think I didn't got the grades on PeopleSoft.
It's on PeopleSoft. There won't be a grade for that on PeopleSoft. You have to find it on D2L. Later, it'll be much later. I put it on PeopleSoft. Okay. Okay.
So it's not going to be in PeopleSoft, right?
No. PeopleSoft, the grade that you'll get there will be a summary grade. It won't be for individual assignments, I don't think. Well, at least not yet. So yeah, please do go and look on D2L for your grade on that. But yeah, I have marked it.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I mean, I haven't marked anything in the last 2 hours. So I mean, if you submitted something 2 hours ago, I haven't marked it, but I marked everything up until this morning. Okay. Any, anyway, any other questions? I hope that helps. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Um, it's kind of fun, the telephone sort of thing, I guess. Yeah, they wear things like what I'm wearing now, right? Those guys on those telephone calls. They, because they have to have their hands free because they need to be typing while they're working, and so they're wearing a sort of outfit like this. Okay, I think